Listen, this is kind of a hateful video. There are much more important things going on in the world right now, and this video is not about any of those things. But I've been getting this opinion of mine validated by a couple other people recently, and for a while there I kind of thought that I was going crazy. So I think I have to be the friend that's too woke and talk about this. Being a woman is, to put it too briefly, a unique array of diverse experiences, and no single definition of womanhood could ever encapsulate for every woman's experience. Despite that myriad of differences, there have been so many ways that women have been able to find community within how womanhood is discussed and celebrated on the internet. So, why are the trends in our recent internet language related to our abilities, our passions, how we operate in the world? Why are they constantly undercutting us? When these two phrases that I'll talk about today became popular last year, I was instantly put off by what they implied. And now as that time has passed and they've solidified more into our cultural language, I've seen a couple other people share sentiments about how they're kind of weird, but I go back and forth constantly because I just feel like I'm ruining the fun. Let's get into it with girl blank. It all begins with girl dinner. This phrase actually meant something different than I thought it meant at its inception. I thought it was like a random amalgamation of snack-like foods that would never really be eaten together, but once all on the same plate, constitute as a full meal, even though they're a little bit unorthodox. I actually made a girl meal video on TikTok when I was eating deli ham, not in a sandwich, rice with cheese mixed into it, and strawberries. Girl lunch, or so I thought. The term was actually coined by a showrunner's assistant named Olivia Marr, who posted a picture of a charcuterie board inspired by food eaten in the medieval times and said it was her girl dinner. The trend eventually morphed into its evil version and became a way for users to chuckle at the fact that they eat 3 almonds and call it a meal. That's a topic for a totally separate video. I want to talk about how this initial term grew to encapsulate so many different topics besides just the food that women eat. You could preface almost anything with the word girl in front of it and elicit a laugh from someone under the age of 35. But you had to be doing something wrong. You had to be misunderstanding. Your incompetence in that subject next to the word girl is what made it funny. There's an amazing essay that's mostly about literary trends regarding the word girl by Robin Wasserman. She talks about how girl can be describing someone who's coming of age, and that the title of woman is something in her future that she's headed towards, but girl can also be demeaning, infantilizing, implying that this person is not as capable and not as smart. I am not immune. I initially used the decision to purchase something with cash instead of my debit because it felt free as girl finances. I have jabbed at my friends, miscalculating a restaurant bill, saying that they're using girl math, and when I said those things, I didn't feel like I was working against my own cause. It was only until a few months afterwards, after I sat with this trend for a while and heard it used in real life, not just on the internet, that it started to just leave an icky taste in my mouth. When it infected offline conversations, when I heard a male coworker say this term to and about a woman, cheering that you're using girl math when she miscalculated counting something. Also, when the next topic of discussion became popular, it made me feel odd in a similar way. Segue into 20-something teenage girl. This terminology began where anything begins nowadays, TikTok, which was primarily with women to use the term to talk about how their lives in their 20s have been overwhelming in a way that makes them feel similar to or want to revert back to their teenage years. There was a recent study from the Census Bureau's Household Pulse Survey that found that half of adults aged 18 to 24 reported depression and anxiety symptoms in the year of 2023. The transition to your 20s, your full adult life, is hard enough already, but the pivotal years of independence skipped over during the pandemic has made the shift even more difficult for people in my age bracket. So I definitely understand the desire to go back to something more comfortable, something known, and revert back to your teenage interests and then feel like you're reverting back to your teenage responsibilities. To explain away your missteps and how overwhelmed you feel at the moment by saying that you actually just feel younger, and that's why. Younger than you are. Less experienced, less prepared for the pressures and expectations of adult life, dodging blame for the mistakes that you haven't even had the chance to make yet. But I immediately wondered why it was not at all popular for men to say that they felt like they were a 20-something teenage boy. They're also undergoing this same difficult transition. with the added pressures of the pandemic. I've actually heard a man say that he felt like a 20-something teenage girl, and that's when I knew that this term was gendered in a really strange, special way. There's a large part of this discussion that exists because of nostalgia content from when my cohort were teenagers that is rampant on the internet. Erin Lee Hoffman talks about it in her Bustle article on this trend. We can log into an echo chamber, reminiscing on what was popular when we were 15, replaying clips, posting old photos, and it's a horrific re-rendering of the only 90s kids remember trend. And to make it worse, there's modern day teenagers doing the classic born in the wrong generation about my youth, which was not that long ago. I like to think. I saw a TikTok of a girl wishing that she could be a teenager when One Direction was active. Acting like it's been centuries since that era. And you know what? You should yearn for that because it was incredible. I count myself lucky that I got to be a part of that. But we as women shouldn't have to apologize and overanalyze why we like things. We don't have to make these excuses and blame it on self-perceived immaturity. In that Bustle article, clinical counselor Raveen Aluk is quoted saying, "We're at this point in our world where we're over-pathologizing humanness. And instead of just trying to figure it out or call it a syndrome, what if we just said, hey, these are things that I enjoy, and maybe they stem from my experiences, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Can I just enjoy this and know this is my identity? This is the person that I am?" Messing up from time to time because you're new at something shouldn't be embarrassing. Liking the media that you also liked when you were 16 shouldn't be embarrassing. And for most of the time, for men, it isn't embarrassing. But for women, through language like this, we're apologizing for it in little ways, beating the critics to the punchline by making the jokes ourselves. And for a moment, we're protected, we're being laughed with and not laughed at, but they're still laughing. And it kind of degrades our conviction, the social belief that we are capable and worth listening to overall. This next part has no sources and no professional phrasing. It's just all from my personal experience. This trend made me feel like a stone cold, disconnected bitch. I'm 24 now, but when this type of language started circulating, I had just graduated college. I really related to those sentiments of feeling lost and unsure and thrown into the deep end, but I never once added up all of those feelings to conclude that I was the same as my teenage self and my teenage brain and my capabilities back then. I've had a lot more experiences since I was a teenager. I mean, I've lived on my own and I've provided for myself and I've held jobs and I've even exceeded at jobs. I've gotten a degree, and I'm sure most of the girlies participating in this trend have done some or all of those things as well. I feel like I'm a lot different than my teenage self. Not to be mean to myself as a teenage girl, or to be mean to teenage girls. I definitely think this trend was really mean to teenage girls. And I understand that it is referencing a notable time girls felt the same way as this 20-something experiences was when we were teenagers. And I hated that I had such a disdain for the ways that women were connecting with each other and supporting each other through these really difficult feelings. I don't know, I just wish it was through a different tagline. Because babe, you're an adult. You're capable. Let yourself have a moment of uncertainty without deeming yourself useless. Anyways, these two sayings I went over are not nearly as prolific as they were a year ago, but so many people still use versions of this trend. I'm just a girl. Whenever I walk into stores, I see merchandise that's like, I'm just a girl, you can't expect me to do that. I would be so overwhelmed. I just don't want to do it. I'm just a girl. What? And these phrases were definitely the kickoff for that language shift in our popular culture. And it's undermining us women, us girls. And I'm personally not seeing men experience the same issue. Men can like the exact same albums and IPs and sports teams for their entire lives and never be embarrassed, never apologize, never claim to just be a teenage boy in his 40s. And I feel like the only notable boy blank phrase right now is boy room, which definitely has a negative connotation, but is not nearly as prolific as its girl counterparts. I want to conclude with something you may have all seen, but I feel it's relevant to bring it back up right now. In a poll conducted by YouGov, about 50% of male responders believed that they, if faced with a necessity, in an emergency situation, could land a commercial airliner with no prior training, just the support of air traffic control in the moment. At least some of the men in your life think that they could land a plane without any experience landing planes, and we're picking apart our own abilities and understandings nonchalantly. I'm not saying that we should never joke around. I'm sure this video, as I said, will get me many friend who's too woke allegations, and I deserve them. But I personally know that having all of these thoughts about these trends has really made me reflect and pay attention to how I talk to myself as a 20-something. Full stop. All right, that's the end of my rant. That's the end of my friend that's too woke rant. There will be plenty more in the future, I'm sure. Because I've seen that some people have been reflecting on this recently and realizing the weirdness of it. And literally, I was just with a friend this weekend. She was like, I'm just a girl, and then paused for a second and then said, that phrase has brought us back 20 years. And I was like, yes, it has. And I've thought it has since the beginning of its inception. So I just wanted to get these thoughts out there and tell you that if you are on the same boat, I'm relating, I feel you. Maybe let's try and work on it. I don't know. There's also bigger things happening. Thank you for watching. You can subscribe, you can like this video, you can do whatever you want. And I hope you have a lovely holiday, and I'll see you in the new year.